All right, let's jump right in.
Sounds good.
Today, uh, we're taking a deep dive into Rio Tinto.
Okay.
It's a company that's really at the heart of the whole mining industry.
Yeah.
And we've got their 2023 annual report and their strategic report
Okay.
to kind of guide us.
Right.
These reports, they're packed with information
Mm-hmm.
about how they operate, how they're doing financially,
Yeah.
and maybe even more interesting is how they're planning
Okay.
to handle this whole energy transition.
That's right.
This shift towards a more sustainable future. So it's really like getting a behind the scenes look
Yeah, absolutely.
at this global giant.
It is. It is.
So let's start with the basics.
Okay.
Rio Tinto's business is pretty diverse.
Yeah, it is.
They're not just focused on one thing, right?
No, not at all.
So can you give us an overview of their main areas of operation?
Sure. Their portfolio is really spread across four main product groups: iron ore, aluminium, copper, and then a category they just call minerals.
Minerals, okay.
Which is kind of a catch-all for things like titanium dioxide, slag, borates, and salt.
Okay, so it's a pretty diverse mix.
Yeah.
And geographically, they're not limited to just one place, are they?
No, not at all. They're spread out across 35 countries
Wow, 35 countries.
with a massive workforce of 57,000 employees.
That's a huge operation.
It is. It's a truly global company.
So to give our listeners a sense of scale, can you tell us about some of the specific locations
Okay.
where Rio Tinto is actually, digging and processing these materials?
Okay, sure. Well, for instance, a lot of their iron ore operations are concentrated in the Pilbara region of Western Australia.
Right, I've heard of that.
They have aluminum smelters operating in the Saguenay region of Quebec, Canada.
Wow.
And they even have a stake in the Resolution copper mine in Arizona.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a project with a lot of potential.
It sounds like they're really leaving their footprint all over the globe.
Yeah, they are.
And on top of all of that, I was reading that they're also actively searching for new deposits.
Yeah, they're not just sitting still.
So what's the strategy behind that?
Well, they're exploring for 8 different commodities in 18 countries.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It's a clear sign that they're really thinking about the future.
Yeah, and positioning themselves for growth.
Exactly.
So it seems like they're making big bets on certain materials.
Yeah.
What's driving that?
Well, their growth strategy is built on 3 pillars, and the first one is all about expanding their presence in materials that are essential for the energy transition.
Interesting.
So things like copper for electric vehicles and renewable energy infrastructure.
Right, that makes sense.
Aluminum for lightweight construction, and they're even focused on high-grade iron ore, which can be used to produce more efficient, low-carbon steel.
So they're not just going along with the energy transition.
Yeah.
They're trying to be a leader in it.
Exactly. They want to be at the forefront of it.
And how does that tie into their second pillar of growth?
Well, that one focuses on decarbonizing their own assets.
Okay, so reducing their own environmental impact.
Yeah, they're aiming to cut their Scope 1 and 2 emissions.
So those are the emissions directly from their operations and their energy use, right?
That's right. And they're targeting a 50% reduction by 2030.
50%, that's ambitious.
It is. And to achieve that, they're planning to invest something like $5 to $6 billion.
That's a big commitment.
Yeah, it is. It shows how serious they are about this.
So how are they actually going to pull off such a big reduction in emissions? I mean, where do they even start?
Well, they're tackling it from multiple angles. They're looking into renewable energy sources to power their operations.
Okay, so like solar and wind power.
Yeah, and they're working on improving energy efficiency across the board.
Makes sense.
And they're also exploring some really innovative technologies.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Well, one that caught my eye is called bioiron.
Bioiron.
Yeah, it's a process that uses biomass instead of coal in iron making.
Wow, so that could be a game changer.
If it works at scale, yeah, it could significantly reduce the steel industry's carbon footprint.
That's exciting.
It is. It's cutting edge stuff.
Okay, so that's 2 pillars down. What about their third pillar of growth?
That one's all about developing innovative products and technologies to help their customers decarbonize.
Ah, so they're not just focused on their own operation.
Yeah.
They're trying to help their customers become more sustainable as well.
Yeah, and that's a smart move because it positions them as partners to their customers in their sustainability journeys.
Right. It's not just about selling raw materials anymore.
Exactly. It's about providing solutions.
And what's their target for this?
They're aiming for net zero processing emissions by 2050.
2050, that's a long way off, but also a really ambitious goal.
It is, but it aligns with the global push for a low-carbon future.
So, lots of forward-looking stuff, But let's face it, no company operates in a bubble. What are some of the challenges that Rio Tinto is facing right now?
Well, the mining industry is inherently complex. It faces a lot of scrutiny, and it's constantly evolving.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Rio Tinto knows this, and they've developed a pretty comprehensive risk management approach to deal with it.
So they're not just sticking their heads in the sand.
No, they're trying to be proactive.
Can you give us some more insights into their risk management strategy? Like what kind of scenarios are they planning for?
Well, one of the key scenarios they're looking at is something they call fragmented leadership.
Fragmented leadership. Okay, what does that mean?
It essentially describes a world with volatile economic growth, political stagnation, and a lot of geopolitical tension.
So basically a lot of instability and uncertainty.
Yeah, and it could lead to all sorts of disruptions.
It sounds like a pretty challenging environment to operate in.
It is, but Rio Tinto is trying to be prepared for it.
And how are they doing that?
Well, they're focusing on building a more resilient portfolio, investing in energy transition materials that are likely to be in high demand regardless of what's happening politically.
More.
Yeah, and they're also working to strengthen their relationships with key stakeholders, including governments and communities.
So it's about building trust and partnerships to navigate those choppy waters.
Exactly. It's about being prepared for anything.
But beyond these big picture scenarios,
Yeah.
are there any specific challenges they're dealing with right now on the ground?
Well, one area that always comes up in the mining industry is community relations.
Right, because mining operations can have a big impact on local communities.
Exactly. And Rio Tinto has had to navigate some sensitive situations in the past.
Like what?
Well, there were protests at their QIT Madagascar minerals site, for example, and these situations highlight just how important it is for mining companies to engage with local communities.
Yeah, to address concerns and operate in a way that respects everyone's rights and interests.
Absolutely. It's all about building trust and finding common ground.
And I remember reading about the incident at the Namoldi mine in Australia.
Oh, right, where they damaged a cultural heritage site.
Yeah, that was a major setback for them.
It really damaged their reputation and raised serious questions about their commitment to cultural heritage management.
So how have they responded to that?
Well, they've acknowledged their mistakes,
Good.
and they've pledged to learn from the experience and improve their practices going forward.
So it's a reminder that social responsibility is non-negotiable for a company like Rio Tinto.
It is, especially given their size and global impact.
It sounds like they're trying to strike a balance
Yeah.
between pursuing their business objectives and being mindful of their social and environmental responsibilities.
It's a complex landscape to navigate.
It is, but it's something they have to do.
Absolutely.
But before we dive deeper into those challenges,
Okay.
I think it's time to take a look at their financial performance.
Yeah, let's do that.
After all, the numbers tell a story, don't they?
They do, and it's a fascinating story in this case.
All right, so let's open the books
Okay.
and see what they reveal about Rio Tinto's financial health.
Sounds good.
Where should we start?
Well, let's begin with their overall revenue. In 2023, they brought in
54.04
billion.
Okay, so 54.04 billion.
Yeah, but that's actually down slightly from the previous year.
Oh, that's not good, is it?
Well, it's important to understand the context before we jump to conclusions.
Okay, so what's the context?
Well, one of the key factors was the fluctuation in commodity prices.
Ah, right, because we were talking about how they're exposed to those market forces.
Yeah, and the prices of iron ore, aluminum, and copper all experienced some volatility during the year.
So even a giant like Rio Tinto can't escape the ups and downs of the global market.
Nope, they're very much at the mercy of supply and demand.
But despite that revenue dip, they still managed to deliver a pretty solid underlying EBITDA of $23.89 billion.
Yeah, that's a key indicator of their operational profitability.
Okay, so remind me, what exactly is EBITDA?
EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Okay, and why is that such an important metric?
Well, it basically measures the company's core operating profitability.
Okay.
It strips away some of the accounting noise and focuses on the cash flow generated by the business.
So a healthy EBITDA means they're running a tight ship.
Yeah, it shows that they're making money from their core operations.
Which is a good thing.
Definitely.
But what about the bottom line?
Mm-hmm.
What was their actual profit in 2023?
Their profit after tax came in at $10.058 billion.
$10.058 billion.
Yeah, but again, that's down from the previous year.
So this seems like those market forces and cost pressures are really squeezing their profitability.
Yeah, they are.
To get a clearer picture, maybe we should break down their financial performance by product group.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So iron ore is still their biggest moneymaker, right?
Absolutely. Iron ore brought in the lion's share of their profits.
And what about the other segments?
Well, aluminum and copper, they both saw declines in profitability in 2023,
Why is that?
mainly due to lower sales volumes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, those pesky increased energy prices we talked about earlier.
It seems like the energy transition is a bit of a double-edged sword for them right now.
Yeah, it's creating opportunities in the long term, but it's also creating some challenges in the short term.
So they're having to walk a bit of a tightrope.
They are.
But even with those challenges, Rio Tinto is still in a strong financial position overall, right?
Yeah, they are. They generated $15.2 billion in net cash from operating activities.
$15.2 billion.
Wow. Which basically shows their ability to generate cash from their core business operations.
So they're making money. But what are they doing with all that cash?
That's a great question, and one that we'll dive into next.
Sounds good. Let's take a break and come back to that. So we were talking about all that cash that Rio Tinto is generating.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how they're using it
Okay.
to create value for their shareholders.
Right. Well, they're really focused on striking that balance
Mm-hmm.
between rewarding their current shareholders and investing in future growth.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit.
Right.
First of all, what's their dividend policy like?
It's actually pretty generous.
Okay.
For the full year 2023, they declared an ordinary dividend of 435 US cents per share.
Okay, so how much does that add up to?
That totals a payout of $7.1 billion.
Wow, that's a significant chunk of change.
It is, and it represents a 60% payout of their underlying earnings.
So they're not being stingy with those dividends.
No, not at all.
But are they sacrificing future growth to pay those dividends?
Not necessarily.
Ah.
They're also committed to reinvesting in their business,
Okay.
especially in those energy transition materials that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And they've set aside up to $3 billion per year for growth capital expenditure.
So they're trying to keep both current investors happy with dividends
Yeah,
while also planning for the future.
exactly. It's a balancing act.
It is. And speaking of balancing acts, what about share buybacks?
Ah, good question.
Are they using that strategy as well?
Well, they haven't announced any specific share buyback programs recently,
Okay.
but it's definitely a tool that they could use if they wanted to.
Right.
Remember, their capital allocation strategy is all about being balanced,
Yeah.
and share buybacks could play a role in that.
So they're keeping their options open,
Exactly.
which makes sense in such a dynamic market.
It does.
But let's circle back to their financial statements for a moment.
Right.
We've talked about revenue and profit,
Yeah.
but what about their balance sheet and cash flow?
Right. Those are crucial pieces of the puzzle.
They are. They give us a more complete picture of their financial health.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the balance sheet.
Okay.
For those of us who aren't financial experts,
Yeah.
what are the key things to look for there?
Well, the balance sheet essentially shows what Rio Tinto owns.
Okay.
Those are their assets,
Mhm.
what they owe.
Their liabilities.
Right. And the difference between the two,
Okay.
which is their equity.
So it gives us a snapshot of their financial position at a specific point in time.
Exactly.
So if we were to take a look at Rio Tinto's balance sheet at the end of 2023,
Okay.
what would stand out? What should we be paying attention to?
One of the most important things is their cash position.
Oh,
Having a healthy cash balance is crucial for any company.
right. Especially in a volatile industry like mining.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Rio Tinto had $6.774 billion in cash and cash equivalents on hand at the end of 2023.
Wow. That's a lot of cash.
It is. It gives them a lot of flexibility.
But they also have debt, right?
Yeah, debt is a normal part of doing business.
Especially for a company as big as Rio Tinto.
Right. And at the end of 2023, their borrowings, excluding overdrafts,
Okay.
stood at $13 billion.
Okay, so $13 billion in debt. That sounds like a lot.
It does, but it's important to look at it in relation to their ability to generate cash to service that debt.
Right, so that's where the cash flow statement comes in.
Exactly.
It tells us how cash is moving in and out of the company.
Yeah, and when you look at Rio Tinto's cash flow statement for 2023, you see they generated $15.16 billion in net cash from operating activities.
Okay, so that's the cash they're bringing in from their core business operations.
Right, which is a positive sign.
It is.
Oh.
But of course, they have to reinvest some of that cash back into the business.
Yeah, they have to maintain their equipment, fund their operations, all that stuff.
So that's where free cash flow comes in.
Exactly. Free cash flow is what's left over after accounting for those capital expenditures.
Okay, and why is that so important?
Well, it's the money that they have available to pay dividends,
Right.
buy back shares, reduce their debt, or pursue new growth opportunities.
So it's really the fuel for their future growth.
It is. It is.
And in 2023, Rio Tinto generated $7.657 billion in free cash flow. Okay, so they have a pretty good amount of financial firepower at their disposal.
Yeah, they do.
But I want to go back to their income statement for a minute.
Sure.
We talked about overall revenue, but I'm really curious to hear more about how their individual segments are performing.
All right, well, if we look at their sales revenue breakdown for 2023,
Okay.
it's clear that iron ore is still their main breadwinner,
Okay.
contributing $33.772 billion.
Wow, that's a big chunk of their total revenue.
It is, but I'm actually more interested in the segments that are tied to the energy transition.
Yeah, like aluminum and copper.
Exactly. So aluminum brought in $11.976 billion in sales revenue,
Okay.
and copper came in a bit lower at $3.218 billion.
Okay, but those numbers don't tell the whole story, do they?
No, we need to look at their costs as well.
Right, because profitability is about more than just revenue.
It is.
It's about managing expenses effectively.
Exactly. And Rio Tinto's net operating costs, which include everything from raw materials and energy to labor and transportation, total $27.3 billion in 2023.
$27.3 billion, that's a huge expense.
It is.
It really highlights the scale of their operations
Yeah.
and the challenges of keeping costs under control.
Yeah, it's a constant battle, especially with things like volatile commodity prices and inflationary pressure.
So it's a delicate balancing act,
It is.
maximizing revenue, managing costs, and navigating a complex global market.
It's not easy.
But Rio Tinto seems to be handling it pretty well so far.
Yeah, they have a strong track record.
And their commitment to the energy transition should serve them well in the long run.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From their business segments and growth strategy to their financial performance and their commitment to shareholder value.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up,
Okay.
I want to talk about something that we haven't really touched on yet.
What's that?
Risk management.
Yes, that's a big one.
It is, especially in an industry like mining.
Absolutely. There are so many potential risks to consider.
So let's dive into that next.
Right, let's do it.
When we talk about risk management with a company like Rio Tinto,
Yeah.
what are the types of things they really have to worry about?
Well, it's a lot. You have to think about it on a few levels.
Okay.
So you've got like your day-to-day risks,
Okay.
like worker safety,
Right.
equipment failures, or like natural disasters that could stop their work.
Those are the ones you can almost like picture, like something really bad happening.
Right, like an earthquake
Yeah.
or hurricane or something like that.
But then there are the things that are more, I don't know, market related.
Yeah, things that are harder to predict.
Commodity prices, we talked about that.
Yeah, those are always fluctuating.
But also like changes in demand,
right.
regulations, and even, politics around the world.
Geopolitical risks.
Yeah, exactly.
Big ones.
And then you layer on top of that this whole energy transition.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That adds another level of uncertainty.
The whole new set of risks and opportunities.
So how do they make sense of all of that?
Well, they try to be really proactive.
Okay.
They've got a really detailed system for identifying risks. They assess them and then come up with ways to either reduce the risk
All right.
or even use them to their advantage.
I see. So it's not just about avoiding risks. It's also about finding opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give me a specific example
Okay.
of how they do this?
So remember that fragmented leadership scenario?
Yeah, the one with all the instability.
Yeah, that's a key risk they've identified.
Okay.
With the economic swings and the political
The
stuff.
political tensions, yeah.
All of that, yeah.
It sounds like a bit of a nightmare scenario.
It could be, but it's not unrealistic.
Right. It feels like the world's getting more and more unpredictable.
Yeah, I think they're being smart to prepare for it.
So how are they preparing for that?
One way is by trying to build a more resilient portfolio,
Okay.
focusing on those energy transition materials that are going to be in high demand no matter what happens politically.
Right. Because even if things get chaotic, the need for those materials isn't going away.
Exactly. And they're also strengthening relationships with governments and communities.
So building those partnerships is really key.
It is. It helps them navigate those uncertain waters.
And what about climate change?
Yes, that's a big one too.
How are they factoring that into their risk management?
Well, they've done a lot of assessments to see how things like extreme weather,
Okay.
rising sea levels, changes in rainfall, all of that could impact their operations.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Mining is so connected to the land and the environment.
Right. So those physical risks are definitely top of mind for them.
And where are they most vulnerable?
Well, their iron ore operations in the Pilbara region of Australia,
Okay.
that area is prone to cyclones.
Yeah, I've heard about those.
And then their aluminum operations in the Saguenay region of Canada,
hmm
that area could be impacted by flooding.
So, two very different types of climate risks.
Yeah, and they're taking different approaches to mitigate them.
Okay, so what are they doing specifically?
Well, for one, they're investing in climate-resilient infrastructure.
So, building things that can withstand those extreme conditions.
Exactly. They're also implementing early warning systems for severe weather events.
Okay.
And they're even looking at ways to use nature-based solutions.
Like what?
Things like restoring wetlands to help absorb floodwaters, things like that.
Wow, so they're really trying to think outside the box.
They are. They're trying to take a holistic approach.
It sounds like they're really committed to incorporating climate resilience into every aspect of their business.
I think that's one of the things that makes me optimistic about their future.
How so?
Well, they're not shying away from the challenges.
Yeah.
They're facing them head on. They're trying to turn them into opportunities.
That's a great attitude to have.
It is.
I think a lot of companies could learn from that.
Yeah, it's about being proactive, adaptable.
And always looking for ways to improve.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We talked about Rio Tinto's diverse business segments, their ambitious growth strategy, your financial performance.
Their commitment to shareholder value.
Yeah, and of course, their approach to managing risk in a complex and ever-changing world.
It's been a fascinating deep dive.
It has. It really has. So as we wrap up this episode,
Okay.
what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember about Rio Tinto?
I think the main takeaway is that this is a company that's not afraid to change. They're not resting on their laurels.
Well,
They're actively adapting to a changing world, embracing the energy transition, and they're really trying to build a more sustainable and resilient business.
and that's something to be admired.
It is. Their journey won't be easy.
No, there will be bumps along the way.
But they've got the experience,
The resource,
the vision to overcome those challenges.
and emerge as a leader in this new era of mining.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Rio Tinto.
It's a fascinating company.
It is, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But until next time,
Keep exploring.
keep learning and keep diving deep.